Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I welcome you back on this special class that is about teaching of poetry, and it is class 12th once again. And today we have selected the poem Inklings from the Dark, right? So, dear students, this poem is written by Rahman Rahi and it has been translated by Jar Malik. It's believed to be one of the most powerful poems written in Kashmiri by Rahman Rahi, who happens to be the former professor of Kashmiri at Kashmir University, right? So, dear students, now let's see and know a bit more about, because I think it's first time that we are introducing one of the Kashmiri poets at class 12th level, and I would love to just tell you more about this great personality, the son of the soil. He happens to be one of the famous literary critics. He has written a good number of books on literary criticism and yes, of course, poetry, and that's what we are doing today. And when it comes to awards, he is the only Kashmiri poet who has received Sahitya Academy Award, and then Kabir Saman Award was also conferred on him. And finally, an American-based Irfan Katwari Foundation Award is also given to Rahman Rahi. So, we are proud of this great man from our soil. So, today we are going to try to explain, interpret, and together I hope inshallah sit back, open your books at page number, I suppose it is class 12th English textbook, page number 152, right. So, there you will see the text of this very poem, and I will come along with you. Let us try to go for this journey and try to understand what this poem is all about, right. Okay. And yes, we must not forget the great man actually who has made it possible for you and me to understand this poem, and that poem is actually yes, it's translated by Jar Malik. Okay. So, dear students, what will be my program of action? I will be dividing. I want to tell you in the at the very first outset that I am dividing this poem in two parts, right. So, in the first part, see what we will be doing actually today. First of all, we will recite, I will recite the text for you, and you will open your books and see what the text is. Okay. Then we will move to the introductory part of the poem, about the poem, right. Then we will go for explanation, right. It will be denotative type of explanation what the poem is actually, and then I will talk about the symbols in this very poem. So, very powerful symbols in the poem. We will talk about that. Then we will come to imagery. That is another very important aspect that as students of class 12th you need to understand. Why? Because you know it better that there is a very important question that is asked in the examination, particularly for these two areas, symbols and imagery, right. Okay, we will do that. Then we will come down to some of the poetic devices like metaphor and simile. Okay, we will see that. Then maybe some those musical devices are there also. We will talk about that. Then we will come to some very important area. That's actually where we need to crack this poem. They call it the metaphysical poem. There we will crack it in connotative form of understanding, right. And then we will come down the last very important message that you and me will take to our homes. What is the message of this poem, the central theme. So, we will talk about that. Finally, I will come to point of view, then I will talk about the tone in this very poem, and then I will give you some assessment. I want you to do 1, 2, 3 questions right here, and maybe along with your class teacher who teaches you back at your school, right. You can talk to him, and with him you can do few of the questions after we are having the session on this poem. And finally, I will recommend you some further reading where you can understand this poem, right. So, this is actually the lesson plan. This is these are the areas that we will be touching today, fine. So, in two parts, sit with me. Maybe one part will be on one day and another part on another day. All those students who will watch part 1, it is compulsory for them to watch part 2, otherwise they will not be able to comprehend the poem as a single work of art, right. Okay. So, this is the text of this very poem. Let me immediately recite it for you, right. So, dear students, the poem goes like this. I said that it is actually a Kashmiri poem. It has been translated into English by the legendary G.R. Malik. So the poem is like this. Yesternight, my sleep driven off and the thread of my fancies sillit, I espied an eagle in the wild shadows of my mind. On its beak in the same old fashion smouldered the blood of the dove, whose feathers were shed by hilltops into the atmosphere. Turning my head on the pillow, I sighted a deep, dark chasm, and rose and leaned my back against the wall with the cool of the winter in the marrow of my breast. My lips froze dry as whisperings reached me from outside the window. The snowflakes were sailing into the shelter of the crevices. Not a mouse did creep from under the box to the store cabinet. In place of my upper garment, a cat hung by the hanger. Rubbing my eyes, I tried to pull the quilt to my cold back. But, oh, the canary shook and the cold hapless ashes kissed my feet. While the owl hooted outside, "Oh, woe to you, oh, woe!" Fain would I have raised a cry of lament had my heart suited to me by me. Suddenly, I called my mind my darling son. How raptly did he listen to my bedtime tale last night, when I told him of the agony of the oyster in her travails. But he only heard part of the tale when sleep overtook him. I rose like a moon-struck man and turned on the light, and found him lying by the wall like a mushroom on the mount, in deep slumber with fragrant blossoms blooming on his lips, and a drop of sweat dawned fresh, playing on his brow. Perchance he was dreaming the rest of the tale. Perchance the oyster had labored forth a pearl. That's the text of the poem. Now let's go and try to decode or to crack this poem at that level is very, very important, right? And what metaphysical is? Very simple. Beyond the range of what is perceptible by the senses, 6 senses, 5 senses, which we cannot perceive, that's metaphysics. Even it's not belonging to the experienceable physical world, what we can touch, see, that's metaphysical. See, in my last class I told you that there is not a single interpretation of a poem. I am repeating these words for you again. Never think of that there is only one meaning of a poem. For example, taking this poem into consideration, what I have understood. For example, one of my first understanding, what I understood after reading this poem is that this is one of the explanations. It can be a note of confession of some old guilt by the poet and a hope of redemption, forgiveness for the act, maybe for some criminal act in the past. This is one of the centers of meaning wherefrom you can understand this poem. Second one is, it's a painful tale of innocent humanity being suppressed, tortured and traumatized by the dominating powers. But there is a hope at the end that the humanity will rise to see the days of peace, comfort and prosperity. Another one, this poem unveils the plight of modern society caused by moral corruption. It also tries to bring hope in times of terror, turbulence and violence. Even we can say that another one angle can be added that I was discussing with my friends while we were traveling to this place, is that it can be a thinking or understanding of a father and a son. Father having spent his life in one way and expecting his son to have his life in a different way. So see, I gave some 4 or 5 angles of understanding this poem, but I have selected one angle, and for you I am leaving it open. You can add up many other angles, no problem at all, because a work of art is open to criticism, is open to interpretation, and you are there to interpret, but taking all the principles into cognizance. You can't go out of the way. That's very important. So dear students, for example, if we go to the explanation of this very poem word by word, I mean denotative way, what will you see? As I said in the beginning, that is a metaphysical poem, right? And what does that mean here in this context? Yes, it simply means that this poem is replete with figurative language. That's why you might have seen on my blackboard written here, I'll be talking about symbols, imagery, cracking up poetic devices, then I came to this connotative meaning. So this is, the poet is conveying his idea, his message, by he is taking help from symbols, imageries and poetic devices. To crack them, that's our duty, and this is actually metaphysical concept in the poem, right? So yes, if we go line by line, for example, if I just try to give a brief summary of this very poem, that's like this. The poem, when begins, it talks about yesterday night, last night. He says the poet had a kind of dream where his imagination opens up. Suddenly his imagination opens up. It starts running wild. Sometimes he is here and there, he is just having a very strange kind of things he sees. He sees an eagle in the depths of his mind. The eagle is flying over the hilltops and its beak is filled with blood. The blood is burnt, and the blood is of a very innocent bird. It's of a dove. And see, another important thing, the feathers of the dove are scattered over the mountains. The poet feels scared to see this around. Then what does he do? He turns around just to avoid this kind of scene. But here he sees a deep chasm, a gape. He gets up and sits by the wall, feeling chilly cold in his breast. His lips froze while hearing whispers coming from outside. The snowflakes were filling the crevices. In his room, he sees that a mouse is not able to move from under the box to the store, as there is a cat hanging on the hanger where his parent in Kashmiri, where his upper garment used to be. The poet rubs his eyes and pulls his quilt to hide his cold black back. Suddenly, the congery shakes and the cold ashes kiss touch his feet. At the same time, an owl hoots outside, predicting some bad thing to happen. The poet wants to scream out of fear, out of this chaos, out of this confusion, but he is not able to do so. His heart is not there to help him. Now, this is, I think, the first part of the poem, where it is terrible kind of situation created, where it is complete pessimism, where it is that despair, disappointment, violence, that's there. That suddenly we have a complete U-turn, change of events in the poem in the last stanza. What is it? The poet recalls the incident of the last night where he had, in this continuity of his imagination now, he recalls the incident of the last night where he was sitting by his son and telling him a story. His son had raptly listened, he was completely immersed in the story. He was listening to his father, but the poet remembers that when he narrated the part where he had mentioned an oyster struggling with pain and travails, and when he had reached to this part, he had found his son gone to sleep again. He was in sleep. Now, after this, the poet rises up in hysterics, moonstruck, turns the light on. He finds his son lying by the wall like a mushroom on a mountain. The son seems to be in deep sleep with a beautiful smile on his lips like blooming blossoms. He finds a sudden drop of sweat on his forehead, on his son's forehead. He assumes that his son is dreaming, perhaps dreaming the second part of the story in his sleep. He concludes that perhaps his son is dreaming the oyster producing a pearl. So, this is the denotative or simple, I would love to tell you, the simple understanding, the superficial understanding of the poem, right? Now, first of all, let us try to find out some of the symbols in this very poem, right? See the symbols and then try to understand them. After that, we will move ahead, right? For example, if you go to this poem, to me, I think it is filled. There is an overflow of symbols in this very poem, right? For example, if I write few, for example, in the very first word, in the very first stanza, you have eagle, right? Is a symbol. If we move ahead, there is dove. What is it? Is a symbol, absolutely. Okay, if you move ahead and see, you have kangri, that acts as a symbol, right? If you go ahead, you may have other word like cat, which is symbol, right? If you move ahead, there is mouse, it is symbol. Move ahead and you will see oyster, a symbol. Even if you go to the first part and see the man being described, the first part is a story of father, he tells about himself, it's a symbol, right? And then go to the son in the second part, father and son, they represent something. So, that is why I said that this is replete, this is filled with symbols, right? For example, now see, let us go one by one and try to figure out what does it indicate. For example, eagle, what is it? Eagle represents power, it represents tyranny, it represents ruthlessness, ruthless nature. Eagle is a predator. So, is a dominating force. Eagle is something here in this very poem, it represents violence, right? You have seen destruction, it represents death as in the form of the blood that you see on his beak, right? And then if you go to dove, what's this? Is a beautiful example of innocence. Innocence, right? Powerless class of people, voiceless class of people, right? It's a symbol for innocence, but powerless people, voiceless people, right? And oppression. Even here in this case you can say he is an oppressor. Okay? And here this is oppressed, right? So a complete, you can say a wonderful, a big division we are observing in the very first part of the poem. So even a predator, and this is the prey, dove is the prey. Now come down to, oh yes, I have forgot perhaps very important this symbol here, owl, right? Very, very important. What is that? It here simply is a symbol for doom, misfortune, right? Bad luck. So this is very important that you need to understand. And if you go to oyster, yes, this is an example of spiritual perfection. Perfection, commitment, devotion, right? Commitment, devotion, spiritual perfection, hard work, struggle. So through oyster you can see all these things, right? And then yes, you can even yes, if you go, another word that I remember here is pearl. Pearl stands for regeneration or redemption, right? So regeneration, redemption, rather an award to your hard work, a felicitation, a prize, a recognition, a hope, like something. So that's it, right? And even if you see mushroom is there also, forgot, mushroom, that's also mentioned in the poem. That's for germination and life, that symbolizes life, germination, right? So that is how, why I said in the very first outset that this poem is replete with what I said. Yes, it is replete with symbols. There are much more. I said that there is mouse, that's for quietness, hiding, okay. There is cat, it's again, it stands for dominance, a force that dominates. And then man is something that has here in this very poem is an era that stands for cruelty and or mis and bad deeds, and sun is a hope and redemption for something good. And then Kangri is some support, comfort, it stands for comfort, right? So these are some of the very important areas of these are some of the words which you can understand as symbols used in the poem. There are much more, I'll touching these much, right? For example, if you take that dry lips are shown of the man, a drop of sweat. There's a comparison, dry lips, that means he's a choked man, he's under pressure, there is some turbulence, but in the comparison you see a drop of sweat, that signifies freshness, that signifies relax, isn't it? So we will talk about imagery. I hope that we'll be able to complete it in the first part, but in case we completed it, we can take up this again in the second part. See, again, if you talk of imagery, dear students, in this poem, yes, this poem is full of imagery, right? We will talk about the imagery, and we will talk about the poetic devices, the connotative meaning of this very poem, the theme, and other very important areas in the second part of the poem, right? But prior to that, I would love to tell you that for God's sake, kindly sit back, open your book, note down, repeat this class again and again, note down these symbols. You know, these symbols, if you understand first time, I told you, for example, this is the poem. Let me tell you a top secret, all of you students. Most of the times I have seen explanation with reference to context coming from this poem. And there you struggle. You know why? Because you are not able to crack the symbols. So this is the best chance for you. I have given you the symbols now from the whole poem. If a reference to context stanza comes from this poem, I suppose that this will be easy for you to crack, right? Reference, explanation, context, simple, 5 marks. That is what I am giving you. So take care of that. Take all those notes that I shared with you, and kindly stay back, stay safe, right? Pandemic time and the best time to read and write. See, there is blessing in disguise. If you go back, get back and sit back at home and start, you have calm, cool, there is no disturbance at all. You can enjoy it at home, but you need to concentrate and condition your brain that this is the best time for me, let me study. Right? Thank you very much. I will come back to you in the second part. Till then, bye-bye.